But here is the twist. Here is what changes everything. Before we begin, I need you to stay until the last story. The final one. I still have to pause before I read it.
There is a story in the Pokédex that most people scroll past without stopping. No roar, no legendary title, just this, a Pokémon that died alone in the cold and came back. That is Hisuian Zorua. And once you understand what it actually is, not what it looks like, but what it is, you won't look at it the same way again.
They were driven out. Not for any harm done. Simply because they were different, and people in new places don't often make room for things they can't explain.
Into the snow, into the cold that Hisui does not apologize for. And there, alone, without a single creature that chose to stay, they died. According to the Pokédex, hear this slowly. It shows itself to humans in the form of the last person who was kind to it before it died. Imagine you find it, half buried, barely breathing. You kneel, you speak softly, you give it whatever warmth you have left after a long day of surviving yourself.
And then you moved on. Because you had to. Because the road doesn't wait. You never look back. You were the last kind thing it ever knew. And you didn't even realize. Long after you forgot. Long after the snow covered everything.
If that already reached somewhere in you, subscribe to Teardrop Tales. Every week, a story you didn't know you needed. Don't let the next one start without you. But what about the one that has nowhere left to walk and keeps walking anyway? When the grief doesn't send you somewhere, it just stays.
Rain doesn't know what it means. It falls because the sky fills and the water has nowhere left to go. There's no intention in it, no memory.
Except, perhaps, when it comes from Gudra.
Gentle, slow-moving, one of the softest creatures in a category full of ancient, terrible power.
The Pokédex entry that matters isn't about the slime. It says Gudra has been abandoned by trainers. When it is lonely, it wanders. It still approaches.
Gudra produces moisture when it grieves. The water isn't weather, it isn't incidental. When Gudra cries, the world around it gets wet.
It was raised by someone, once. Gudra doesn't form fully trusting in the wild, it learned that from a person, from being loved. And then, at some point, the trainer was gone. The Pokédex uses the word beloved, present tense, like the category still exists, like it still believes that it's possible.
Most creatures, after being left once, close, they narrow, they make themselves less reachable. Gudra didn't. Gudra is still out there, holding its arms open.
Somewhere between the long grass and the rain it keeps making, holding its arms open. For a person it still calls beloved.
But the next one isn't about waiting. It's about a creature that took the thing that should have broken it and learned, over a very long time, to dance with it instead.
Of all the stories in today's video, this is the one that costs something to tell. Not because it ends the worst, because it is the most quietly true. In Lavender Town, there is a tower. You know it by the music, that high, strange tune that made some players leave the room, feel a cold they couldn't explain even in August.
There is a ghost here, a Marowak, the mother. She stood between her child and the thing that was coming. She didn't come back from that. But here is the part nobody talks about. The child lived. The Cubone grew up.
It carried the skull, not as armor, as the last thing left of the only creature that had ever looked at it, the way a mother looks, and it wore that face everywhere.
And eventually, in Alola, where the land is warm and the nights arrive gently, something happened. The grief changed.
The Pokédex reads, the Marowak that became one with its mother's departed spirit. One with, not haunted by, not carrying, one with.
Somewhere between the cold tower and the warm islands, between carrying a weight and learning to move differently with it, the grief became fire. People gather to watch. Some of them cry without knowing why.
because their bodies recognized it before their minds did.
The mother never left Lavender Town. The child is still wearing her face. They are separated by everything. And somehow, less separated than most people who stand in the same room. Just breathe for a second. If this one landed somewhere real, drop a fire in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, I'll be here. The skull it wears is not a tragedy. It is not a monument. It is the longest hug ever given. It just looks like bone from the outside. The next story is quieter at first. It looks like a warning. And the darkest part is that the warning was right, just not in the way anyone thought. They named it the Disaster Pokemon. That title, stamped into the Pokédex like a verdict, is the most unjust thing ever written about any creature in this world. Absol didn't cause the disasters, it came before them. That is the entire story. The difference between those two things is everything. Absol has a sensory organ that detects disturbances in the natural world. Not mystical, literal, the way a dog's ear turns before the sound reaches you, the way birds flee a coast hours before the wave.
And when it feels that, it comes down from the mountain, into your field, into your town, into the place where you live, and it stands there.
White, still, that crescent blade catching whatever light there is. Present, impossible to miss. It came to be seen, because being seen was the whole point. And you run. Every time, across every region, in every account, you run, and you tell your neighbors, and the next morning someone asks why you look pale. We saw an Absol. And then the disaster came. Because Absol was right, it is always right.
And Absol was here before this. It brought it here.
The Pokédex reads, it was mistakenly blamed for causing disasters, so this Pokémon lives in the mountains far from people. Mistakenly blamed, far from people. 2 phrases, 1 sentence that should not exist.
But here is the twist. Here is what changes everything. Absol comes back. Every time. Every new disaster. Despite the rocks. Despite the running. Despite all of it. There is no pack. No one waiting at the base of the mountain. No other Absol saying, good run, you tried. Just the mountain. Just the silence.
The disaster Pokemon, who never caused a single disaster, who came to stop everyone, who is still on the mountain right now, waiting for the next time the world needs someone it will immediately blame. Tell me, which story has hit you hardest so far? Drop the name in the comments. I want to know. Because what's coming in the final chapter might completely change your answer. The last story I almost didn't include. There's a creature older than most languages we use to describe it. It did something the world needed, once. There was a time when the sky went dark, not night dark, catastrophe dark, when volcanic ash rose high enough to blot out the sun, and the world went still. The warmth stopped coming, the grass, the rivers, every creature that had built its entire existence around the certainty of light went still, because the one thing that had always been there wasn't. The Pokédex says, directly, without myth, without qualification, when volcanic ash darkened the atmosphere, Volcarona's fire replaced the sun's light.
Nobody asked it to. There is no record of a call, a ritual, a voice. The Pokédex doesn't say it was summoned, it says the sun was gone and Volcarona was there instead.
Maybe it is as it is nature. Maybe it's still outgrows. When plant grows, it could survive because of it.
The ash cleared. The real sun came back. The world looked up and breathed. And Volcarona, nobody told it to stop. Always moving, always climbing, still there. There is no entry that says it rested. The function became identity. The purpose became the self. And when the world no longer needed what you gave everything to provide, what do you do with the burning? I think the sky is the only place it ever felt like what it actually was. Up there, above the ash, above the world and its memory of what it needed from you. You are just the light. You are just the warmth. And nothing has forgotten you yet. These are the stories Pokémon never wanted you to forget. Some creatures burned so you could be warm, and never stopped burning after the cold was gone.
If Teardrop Tales meant something to you today, subscribe. Ring that bell. The next story is already waiting, and it is heavier than anything we covered today.